Yeah, I'm definitely trying to play this game like Street Fighter V and not having the success I would in Street Fighter V for doing that. And I really want to talk about the meta now. The flow of matches is definitely different. I mentioned previously how the game felt like Street Fighter V, and I don't know what they've tweaked exactly, but this feels different, especially playing someone like Guile, who's a zoner. I'm actually able to play neutral like I could in Street Fighter 4 to some degree. Now, there's a good bit more. It's not like, the hardcore neutral fest that Street Fighter 4 was. Play super safe, never take any risk, and you're going to win because that's how that game is. And
there's a lot of risk.
Yeah, but there's far more risk in Street Fighter 6 than that does compare to Street Fighter 5. You have to bet some stuff in there. You have to make your reads, but it definitely does not feel as hardcore as Street Fighter 5 does in terms of like how quickly things can snowball out of control and you're dead. As John was mentioning, a lot of moves feel like -1 or whatever, and your turn is over, and you can't easily extend your turn right now, as far as we know. That may change with time, but that was something notorious for Street Fighter 5. It's like, hey, it's my turn, I'm gonna take it. Oh no, Ed just did a EX uppercut and I died. Great, thank you. That's so Street Fighter, right? And so that it definitely has lost some of the Marvel feeling that Street Fighter 5 had, and it feels much more like a traditional Street Fighter game, which is a very good thing. Street Fighter should feel like Street Fighter.
It's interesting. You were saying that because you played at Evo, right? And that was probably a different build. And like when you said it feels like Street Fighter 5.5, I was like, oh no, that sounds terrible. From what I had watched, I did not expect that. I thought, wow, this looks a little different. I'm glad that you're saying it's different now, because I was like, dude, this does not, to me, feel like Street Fighter 5.5. Now, there are certainly some aspects of an overlap, but I think this is much more Street Fighter 4 and a good peppering of Street Fighter 3 in certain ways.
Yeah.
And it's like the fun ways. We spoke recently with a special guest, and we'll you'll see that. But we were considering like what parts of the different games of the different past Street Fighters are they going to kind of insert into this. And I don't want to go so far as to say like they've grabbed the best of Street Fighter 3 and the best of Street Fighter 4. It's too early, and we're not playing the game that we're going to be playing, once we understand it fully and when we know the meta. But from where we're at right now and in the basics, it does feel like you can absolutely play a footsie-based control fest. And as you learn, as your brain picks up on things like when Drive Impact is coming out and you're able to react to things like that, if you're playing like calm, conservative, watchful, like this game will reward you to the point where I actually have a little bit of trepidation that in the highest levels, this game might get super, super slow, because the kind of risk of sticking out a button is really scary. Now, it's going to be that as far as I can tell, you're going to need to put a button on your opponent. You do not miss. If I'm able to get as consistent of whiff punishes as I feel like I'm getting now compared to what I've experienced in Street Fighter 3, 4, and 5, people like Punk or like I feel like Fujimura or a lot of these like really pro players are going to be masters. You are not going to get a lot if this game stays the way it is right now. If you miss in front of one of these people, you're going to die hard. And so I think what the game is going to be is you're going to take a lot of cautious steps and maneuvering, and you are only going to push the buttons and make the advances that you are extra confident in, or that you can make safe or cover with some drive meter or something, because otherwise it is your ass.
Yeah, I can see the game definitely heading in that direction, but I'm not sure it's actually going to end up there. I definitely think it's a facet of it, and that is very much a callback to Street Fighter 3 and unfortunately Street Fighter 4. Those games where you can try to unleash holy hell on someone, but your odds of getting your butt kicked for doing it are pretty darn bad, right? And then Street Fighter 5, the complete opposite pendulum swing, where it's like you can not be doing stuff in that game, but it's a really bad idea to not kind of constantly be hitting buttons and doing things because you want to unleash the holy hell of offense on people, and it's generally no real drawback to doing it. And how Street Fighter 6 really differs there, especially playing someone like Guile, is I can sit there and ping away at your drive gauge, and it starts seeing you getting down closer to your being able to get into the burnout state and such. And it's like, oh man, like they're not only am I pelting you and taking some chip damage and building meter and doing all this other kind of stuff, I'm also chipping away at your drive gauge now, which is it's kind of putting a little bit of pressure on the opponent with your zoning that has not really quite been available before. And I will note here that resource management is, and Capcom is dead on about this, it's going to be a huge thing here in this game. And the stuff that looks really good right now, if it's costing you 3 bars to do, like the drive rush and stuff we're talking about, especially if you do that twice, you're out and you might be dead on someone like Guile, who can just hold his ground and keep you out. And then the moment he gets an opening, he's blowing you up with a drive impact or something like that. You have to be really conscientious about your resources in this game, and we're nowhere near close to scratching the surface there. But when Capcom puts that kind of message out there to the community, when they put that in their straight up their website, and the developers talk about that, I have yet to see a time ever in the history of Capcom where that has not come to fruition. So resource management is something that I'm not hearing a lot of people talk about, but you can highlight and underline that and realize it's going to be a gigantic impact with some time. But we're not there yet, and that's okay. It's no one picks up and masters these games in 20 minutes, despite what you might hear on the internet. That actually is not the case.
Oh, especially not this game, man. This game is so deep, and you can have fun in the basics. Like you can play like say a fireball uppercut game and get some satisfaction out of that right off the bat, which is so important because you need that entry level fun to keep people around long enough to get to those deeper levels. But just you start theory fighting with all of the potential of the drive system and everything else in it, and like the way that supers now, like the role that supers and super meter plays, especially because it affects drive system or drive meter when you're landing one of these. Where you're going to use supers, I think is very different than where we traditionally have. So many things.
Actually, before we move on that note, I've noticed that you can do a level 1 super like with Guile, and like the added on damage is nice, but it's not like a game changer. Going into his like level 3 critical art, which is the one where he does all the flash kicks and like steps on your face and flash kicks you very violently.
Yes.
That's the one that's really kind of the game changer there, where you're getting kind of like that full ultra or full super damage like you're kind of used to. Level 1 supers don't seem to have that much of an impact right now. They're kind of like, I would actually compare those to kind of like Third Strike, when you had a character like that had a 3-bar super basically. Yeah, you can spend it, you can do it in 3 stocks of super, I should say, not a 3-bar, but 3 stocks, and you'll get that extra damage, but you're getting like 20-30% damage or whatever on there, at least at this early stage. It's those level 3s are a really big thing to save up for, and you're cashing out when you do that. You're really putting your chips in the middle and saying this better work, so often comboing into it. But it's quite interesting how even the super management in this game is quite a bit different than really anything I've seen in a Street Fighter game.
I find that I am looking at the drive gauges as much as I am looking at the health bars, maybe more often. And when you do a level 3 super, you get this big cinematic. In the meantime, I think you're still recovering back any missing drive gauge, and every hit that you perform during your super is draining your opponents. There's a huge strategy behind that depending on where you are in the match and the life bars and everything, because maybe you're saving a level 3 because you're really close to burning out, but if you land your level 3, you might get them burned out, or at least let yourself get some breathing room and get some of your meter back. It's not just for damage, it's also to manipulate where the drive meter is. And that, like I say, is, obviously not just as important as health, because health is the be-all, end-all in terms of it decides the round, but it's right up there, and it influences where your health can be so strongly that you are keeping an eye on the drive gauge, maybe even more than you are checking up on it, more than you are the health.
Yeah, and the drive gauge is right up there by your health bar. Capcom wants you looking at that constantly, and I don't see a future where I'm not constantly eyeballing that. Like it's we're getting into real-time strategy, kind of genre type stuff with resource management and all that, but this is our future, kind of thing, and it's like but I'm happy with that. Anything that encourages more cerebral play, I'm very happy with.